Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video in which we review probability. So probability is the assigning of a number between 0 and 1 to a random event to indicate how likely it is to occur. So let's go through what that means. So firstly, I mentioned random events. We're interested in finding the probability of events whose outcome is down to chance. There's no point finding the probability of an event that I control. For example, what's the probability I wear blue tomorrow? Doesn't really make any sense since I control it. So what we want to do to these random events is we want to give them a number. Why do we do that? Well, let's say, for example, I asked you, is it more likely that you will attain an A in maths or attain an A in English this semester? Now, that's a very subjective question. If we're able to assign each of those two events a number, we can compare their likelihoods really easily. For example, if we knew that the probability you get an A in maths is 0.6 and the probability you get an A in English is 0.5, both numbers between 0 and 1, we can clearly tell that it's more likely you'll get an A in maths. So that's our goal here. So we can compare how likely two events are to occur, we need to give them a number. Because when you're comparing two numbers, there's no ambiguity. It's clear which is larger. So as I said, probability has to be between 0 and 1. So if I ever say, what's the probability of blah, 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 you need to give me a number between 0 and 1. So, of course, the closer the probability is to 1, the more likely it is to occur. The closer the probability is to 0, the less likely it is to occur. Events with probability 0 are impossible. Events with probability 1 are certain. You probably knew all this, and you're probably familiar with this formula that says probability of an event is the number of ways the event can occur over the total number of outcomes. We call it NS. It means the number in the sample space. So let's look at a quick example. So let's look at this example here. A 10-sided die with faces labeled 1 to 10 is rolled. What's the probability that the number I roll is odd and a multiple of 3? So note, I'm asked, what is the probability? So the answer I give should be a number between 0 and 1. So we're going to use this formula here. So the sample space just lists all the possible outcomes. So when I roll the die, I could get a 1, a 2, a 3, all the way up to 10. So there are 10 possible outcomes here. So the probability of rolling a number that's odd in a multiple of 3. So I've got to say, how many ways can that occur? Well, I could get a 3. That's odd and a multiple of 3. It's both of those things. I could also get a 9. That is odd and a multiple of 3. They are the two ways the event can occur. So the required probability is 2 ways it can occur out of 10 in total, and of course that simplifies to 1 over 5. You could also write this as 0.2 or 20%, it wouldn't matter. So I've given a number between 0 and 1. So what that means is 1/5, a half would be around here, 1/5 would be down here. So this means it's unlikely to occur. Another way to interpret this is if I were to roll this 10-sided die heaps and heaps of times, I expect that I would roll an odd number and a multiple of 3 1/5 of the time. So if I were to say roll this 10-sided die 80 times, I expect that I would roll a 3 or a 9 1/5 of those 80 times. Of means times. So 1/5 of 80 is 16. So I expect I would roll a 3 or a 9 16 out of those 80 times. So the number of times I expect something to happen is just the probability times the number of trials. Of course, this may not happen in reality. If I roll the die 80 times, I may not get exactly 16 of those coming up as a 3 or a 9. This is why it's called theoretical probability. The theoretical probability that we calculated here is what should happen. It's the proportion or fraction of times that something should happen. All right, now we're just going to quickly go through the sum of probabilities. So just as percentages add to 100%, the sum of probabilities is always 1. Now we can use that to find unknown probabilities. So let's say I toss a coin 7 times. So what I'm saying here is that the probability of getting 0 heads is the same as the probability of getting all 7 heads, and that's 1 over 128. Probability I get 1 head or 6 heads, both 7 over 28. 2 heads and 5 heads is 21 over 128. So what would be the probability that I get 3 heads? What would be this P3 here? Well, I'm going to solve that by using the sum of probabilities. I know that all of these probabilities here must add up to 1. If I add up the probabilities of each of the possible outcomes, it always is equal to 1. So if I add up the probabilities I do know, these 6 probabilities, I end up getting 58 over 128. So if all of the probabilities add up to 1, these two here must add up to 1 minus 58 over 128. They must add up to 70 over 128. So all I need to do is divide by 2. The probability of getting 3 heads and the probability of getting 4 heads are both 35 over 128. So that's the answer to my question. So once again, note, I was asked what is the probability. I gave a number between 0 and 1. So 35 over 128, it's quite a bit less than half, so it's unlikely to occur. What this means, if I were to toss 7 coins at the same time, if I were to do that over and over again, I would expect that 35 128ths of the time I would get exactly 3 heads. All right, thanks so much for tuning into this video. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.